how do you think about, as a technologist, bringing in inclusivity in your approach when you're thinking about selecting technology or deploying a technology or changing the world?
We do like applying a technology that you can genuinely say it will disrupt a certain market because of its sudden change in the way it works. No more sensors, just a camera, and you're just good to go.
All right, moving on to our last session of the day, and it is a fireside chat on the topic, the digital revolution will be smart, but only if it's inclusive. Can I please have on stage Wessam Shehieb, CTO at Analytica FZE, and Anis Merchant, EVP at Course5. Let's hear it for them.
I'm joined by Wessam, and he and I have been having conversations since almost a week now about this topic, and I've got to know him more in the last 2 days more. I would say it's been fascinating to know him, but let me read out a little bit about him before we get into the conversation. So Wessam is the actual CTO at Analytica, which is a UAE-based company. He has published more than 15 scientific papers in electrical and biomedical engineering, focused on image and signal processing using AI. He's been recognized in 35 international and national conferences and competitions. That includes QS Reimagine Education, which was specific on AI track, 2 times James Dyson Award, IEEE hackathons, and many more. Don't go with his age and his look. I can tell you the amount of knowledge he has about image and how image processing or signal processing can actually transform and enhance healthcare and medical care. I would say, you'll get to know more about him when we start having this conversation. So Wessam, welcome, bud.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's nice to talk to you for the past couple of days, or say a week. It's been a long time. So thank you very much. Very nice to have you. So let me introduce you, please. So Anis is the Executive Vice President in Course5 Intelligence. He leads the global digital and applied AI and research business. He's gained the sizable digital transformation initiatives and numerous global fortune of over 500 clients across industries, including retail, e-commerce, hospitality, and telecommunications. Anis is passionate about helping companies grow through the innovative applications in AI. So we're talking basically with an AI expert over here.
No, I don't call myself an AI expert. I call myself the student of AI. I'm still a student. I'm still learning, so not an expert.
I will have to see then.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so in today's session, we're going to talk about inclusivity and digital transformation. So as you already know, all of you, for the past couple of years, now digital transformation has been taken a huge step forward. Now, the major question that pops up into anyone's mind, is it really inclusive when it comes to human? Not digital, not technology only, but only to human and different peoples. So I'm going to start with the first question to you, Anis. How did your organization company, as far as took this step forward into digital transformation and inclusivity into your company itself?
No, definitely we can talk more about my company, about the companies we work with. But let me take a step back, and what does inclusivity mean to many of us? Today when you think about digital, the first thing which comes to our mind is technology, and whether technology from a hardware or software perspective. But if you take the other side, and when people think about driving digital transformation, everybody loves to throw a technology at the problem or at the transformation agenda. And I always give this reference that, digital transformation feels like a hammer in our hand, and we are trying to find a wall where we want to bang. rather than the other way around, where we have a problem, where we have a ball, and we need to fix that. So when you think about inclusivity, what happens is in many organizations, they forget and they completely neglect the people and the process part of the organization. They focus on the technology more. And that's where, even in our company and the clients we work with some of the major corporations in the world, like 5 of the most valuable companies we work with. We see that today with most of those majors, and that's something which we've incorporated, before we try to implement anything, we don't try to implement anything. We first focus on our people, we first focus on the process, and really feel, is technology the real answer, or is it just a similar process change? And that is something which is very critical when you think about digital revolution. And it's not just within a company or within a corporation. If you really build on it, today everybody is talking, this Internet 2.0 conference should be actually Internet 3.0, because there is a lot of Web 3.0 conversation. We are living in 2.0, and there was enough conversation about 3.0 today. But if you just take a step back, if you go to rural parts of the world, there's no Internet 1.0 also yet. We've been talking about Web 3.0 for the entire day. I've been hearing metaverse the entire day. If I was playing a game of bingo, I would have called bingo in first hour only, because all the famous terms were thrown out. But when we think about inclusivity, all these, the devices which are there empowering Web 3.0 or digital, they are not available at that sense. So how do you bring inclusivity there? It's not from a people at different class and set within a organization or in a society, but also how do you look at different aspects of whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's capabilities and abilities. And, I can go on about this, but that's, for me, inclusivity is much more larger rather than just thinking about technology.
Lovely. Can you specific any initiative that your company have implemented when it comes to these kind of initiatives?
I'll talk to one from a perspective of what we've done within our own organization, and then what we have done for our customers. And in both, there is some sense of similarities. The first one, where if you just think about attendance management system in all our organization, today, yes, we all talk about employees, but there is so much of support staff in our companies who may not be having that same level of education in basically understanding how to sign in and swipe out. How do you use your basic badge to do it? And for them, tailgating, which is a big security issue in corporations, how do you educate them? How do you bring them to the fold? Because tracking each and every person's movement in a company when you're dealing with critical data is very important. And we neglect that class or that sector of people because we believe that they are not important, but they are very important. So that's something which we have done a lot of education and communication to them rather than thinking from a technology and bringing that inclusivity in. So that's just one of the example. And the message which I'm trying to get is try to think about that frontline staff. Strategies are made by generals in the army. Nobody thinks about the soldiers. So how do you think about those soldiers when you're thinking about the strategy? And in that same analogy, we've done it for our customer, and we've recently won an award for this. Also, when you think about it, there was a conversation about factory and shop floor earlier today, where how manufacturing is still lagging. I actually don't agree. Manufacturing is taking leaps and bounds in innovation and digital transformation. And one specific example I can give you is with one of our clients, which is a global CPG or FMCG major in the world. They wanted to drive waste reduction. And I'm talking about finished good waste reduction. And when I talk about finished goods, if you think about the entire supply chain, value chain, there is waste happening at every stage. But when you waste a finished good, it hurts more. It's not that final product which may cost $10 or 10 dirhams, but just think about the amount of effort which has gone into produce that $10 or a 10 dirham product. You have wasted your precious human resources. You've wasted your precious manufacturing value chain. You've wasted the raw material, so it compounds far more. But to educate the frontline staff, the warehouse managers or the shop floor managers, they are not data savvy. They are not AI experts. They don't understand dashboards. They don't understand neural networks. They don't understand AI. How do you communicate and enable them to make decisions better on a daily basis? So bringing that hat on of inclusivity, we actually spoke to them, and this is a question I asked you: do you look at AI as a replacement or augmentation? For us, the focus is augmentation. So how do you augment that frontline staff's capability by using the right piece of technology and communication, and make it look and make it work better for them, rather than forcing them to use a technology? Because that's one of the biggest hindrance of adoption, where you're forcing somebody to use something which they may not be comfortable with or may not be their first nature.
Perfect. Actually, to follow up on the same question, I have a question related, because today's conference, I think from the start, we were talking about immersive technologies, Web3, all these kind of newer technologies up to date. But don't you think that the current technology is a bit harsh on those who are not following up with them? Like you said, for example, an uneducated or a different level of education people. Like, where do you see, I asked myself this question quite a lot, but I never really got a clear answer. I would like to know how you think of it. Like, what do you see them in 5 years? Like, eventually, because you can't force education on everyone, because it's not always a possibility. But at the same time, with this sudden change everywhere in the world, where do you see them standing in a decade from here?
We need to, and this is, you're bang on when you use the word harsh. Today, if I look at any new technology in any of those famous reports which say this is the best technology for organizations, it will take years or moons to implement it, and it will require a certain level of expertise or training for that person to actually leverage that platform effectively. And for commoners like me, by the way, I call myself an accidental analytics professional. I don't have any engineering or AI degree. I am a finance graduate. I've accidentally landed into this entire industry. So I've never chose this industry. And it took a lot of effort for me to understand. And today, if you have to ask me, can I program a Python code? I can't. But I know how to apply the business application of the technology. And I think this is what it is key. How do you bring the awareness and communication forward for people? That's one aspect. The second is the cost of technology is so harsh that people don't know. We were joking around earlier today, by the way, he has a printed list of questions. And I told him that, how I shared the questions with you. He said, what? I told him I used ChatGPT to actually build those questions for you. And he laughed and he said, I use the same thing for you. So, but I don't know how many people are aware of ChatGPT today, as an example, right? Because we are in that industry, we know about it. But there is lack of awareness and communication. And I don't know if you've used ChatGPT and platforms like that, it's cost prohibitive, or you need a system which can run with it. It takes time, as an example. There are inhibitions. How do you bring out or remove those inhibitions out from people and users? So there was a good analogy earlier in one of the conferences, like the success parameter is when our grandparents actually start using that platform. That's the true success of the adoption. And I completely believe in it today, candidly. If we are able, and it's not grandparents, it's a child as well. If you can teach, like my son asked me, hey, Dad, what do you do? It's difficult sometimes to explain what I do for a living. He just feels that I'm sitting on a computer and playing games, but I'm not, right? But that's not, how do you explain and ensure that a child can use a system and a grandparent can use a system which is very easy and not too harsh and not too overwhelming for them to leverage it?
I think we still have a lot of work to be done when it comes to the technology and the UX in general when it comes to these kind of things. So to run to the next question, how do you envision the role of business leaders in promoting inclusivity?
It goes back to my first point. Don't go and find a hammer. Look at the wall. understand what that wall needs, and look at it from all lenses. So that's first aspect. The second is bring in people from every part of your organization. When we talk about digital transformation, I don't know how many HR managers or HR heads or CFOs or the chief admin officer are sitting in that same room when they're thinking about technology adoption. I often find this overwhelming that we are trying to implement, and I've seen this with many clients, that they're trying to implement a Salesforce platform, not Salesforce.com, but any Salesforce platform or a CRM platform or a marketing automation platform. And if I look around, there is not a single marketer or a salesperson sitting in that room and providing their inputs. And going back to my first point, think about that soldier who's there, that frontline staff. Get them included, get them involved in thinking about how would they use it. Because at an overall level, organizations would be able to carve out 20%, 30% of the processes. That frontline staff can actually uncover the entire 70% and build scenarios which really are applicable. And we've seen that time and again, where we've got those business team members involved right from get-go. The implementation, the success rate, the adoption has been far more easier and less issues rather than trying to combat that. And typically, there are many vendors here, the cost of implementation will be small, but the cost of management and maintenance is far more over the years in terms of the implementation. And that's been true because nobody's bought in that first aspect. And there is enough legwork which needs to be done. It's hard. It's very tough to get people's perspective. Everybody has an opinion and a right to opinion. But how do you distill that opinion from actual actions and steps? I think that's something which business leaders need to really consider before trying to find a hammer and saying, okay, now we have a hammer, that's digital transformation, let's bang the wall, right? Not advisable.
So currently, do you think that we stand in a position where it's inclusive? Or I would say, did the digital transformation move towards the inclusiveness? Was it part of the movement or not?
No, I would say it is still not inclusive. Today, if I have to just think about the implementation of internet as a whole or implementation of any of these social media apps, I'm a big social media user. I use a lot of technology. But if you think about inclusivity, we've not thought about, or the individuals who've implemented, or there have not been enough regulations. Now it's coming to bear. We've not thought about privacy. We've not thought about protection of genders. Both, I'm not saying only women, but both genders. How do you protect them? How do you protect children? Or, that sector of people who can be easily impacted with any ill actions on those platforms. And that is still not inclusive. Those platforms are built typically, I'll give you an example. It's unrelated, but I feel it every day. When I walk into a mall, I am a little, I am scared and I'm ashamed at the same time. Why? Because if I look at those mannequins, which are showcasing those clothes, none of them look like me. I'm a big guy, I understand that. And they are all there with the perfect, size, and I don't have that. I really have to go back of the aisle or back of the showroom to find a size which will fit me, right? It's not just with digital, it's larger inclusivity. That inclusive mindset, we all need to bring it. And that's something which, I would say and then that mindset needs to change. It's not just about technology or digital transformation or anything. It's about when you build something, when you're implementing something, how do you bring the larger forward? Or talk about it, say it, the store is not for you. Just say it openly, that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Other than hiding it at the back and make it feel like you're hiding it. I totally understand. I think one of the biggest problems is the way they advertise things. They have a certain image in their mind and that they want to force it on everyone, which not definitely. It's been there in the business for quite some time. It's not something new only.
And the big FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. There are new brands coming out and I believe I can't wear those brands ever because they don't make my sizes, as an example.
True. I think I got my a fair amount of questions. I will leave it to you now.
Okay. Cool. And we decided this, by the way, we'll do this reverse role, right? Rather than having, because it was a fireside chat, rather than having one person go and play that role. But, I've got to know you better, more now, because we did a similar session earlier today. But when you think about technology, and I'm going to poke you more on this because you saw me kind of helping on that, and you are a technologist, you play a CTO role. Somewhere you may be playing that role which I've been talking about, not making it inclusive. You may correct me, but as a CTO, and I'm going to go off script now, right?
Sure.
So pardon me for that. I'm going to put him on spot here. When you think about technology as a CTO, and you were talking about the cameras you've used in the past to dissect the skin and, do you want to first give a little bit perspective what I'm talking about so that everybody is aware?
Sure. So I worked with different image processing techniques using different types of cameras, hardware. We use with the hyperspectral imaging in different spectrums and multispectral and regular RGB to identify and categorize primary diagnosis of skin diseases. Merely, it was basically for the pimples on the eyelids called MGC. And I've worked around also telemedicine relates to imaging in general.
So these hypersector cameras, I don't think so any one of us ever seen them. Correct me, I was just looking up at those images. They're huge.
Yeah.
The cost of that one single machine is probably worth 10 iPhones, if I'm not mistaken, right? That expensive it is. And we were talking about it being harsh and not being inclusive. So what's your perspective on that?
Okay. So when it comes to hardware, I would say that in technology overall, it's extremely expensive and not inclusive. This is one of the things that I think imaging is playing a very good role and what dragged me into it. Like, for example, you can apply AI model into an imaging hardware by comparing it to another cheaper imaging hardware, and easily you can then transfer this information and have it converted internally through a simple artificial intelligence model. Instead of having to buy a 70K AD, camera, you'll just use your phone camera, which is already available using an artificial intelligence model. Or you could also identify, for example, your heart rate through your phone camera without having any sensors involved. This could be very useful for telemedicine for people who cannot really afford these medical systems. So when it comes to inclusivity and technologies, hardware, I think it's extremely harsh. And sometimes the business models do play a big role. People do know that it's expensive, but they don't really take an action towards reducing the price because their main goal is not to have it inclusive. They'll easily tell you, this iPhone is not meant for poor people. This iPhone is made for another class of people. So if you can't afford it, just don't buy it, these kind of ideas. So, there is still some gap. And one of the most important reasons why software became extremely wide and spread because of the community. Everyone wants to help each other. Open source is everywhere. Everyone gets to learn something and gets to apply it. So it became extremely widespread.
But today, just talking about this further, and you mentioned AI, you were fortunate enough to get a grant. You were fortunate enough to get exposed to those machines where you were able to build those initial models and then make it transferable on a low cost, not the same kind of features, but use that. But we were talking about probably, let's think about students who are in the same situation. They may not get a grant. They may not get, the same luck which you had to get that grant and be exposed to the machines. How do you think, and what will your advice be for those people who cannot get that hardware? Because today software is free, like you said, but that hardware is still unachievable for many of them or not reachable for many of them.
I would say the appropriate flow would be formulating appropriate proposals and reaching out for collaborations. A lot of companies, the moment they realize how important and how meaningful this could be for them, even if it took a couple of years to be approached or achieved, they would take that chance. Organizations like medical hospitals or research-based medical centers, they do already have a huge amount of sets of data. Whether it was like accessible, by the way, a lot of sets of data are already being shared online now with people. But whether it's available or not, people wouldn't really have that problem that, okay, I can share this set of data and let's see what they will do. And they're just testing. If you notice, by the way, the surge of hackathon competitions have extremely increased. The reason for that is that they're getting free ideas by brainstorming with freshers, right? With younger audience than the actual companies. So it became as a very good approach for companies who got stuck, they got blocked with newer ideas to get explored, and they give, of course, opportunity to newer audience and chances and grants and so on.
So let's switch gears. And you asked me a question, how do business leaders think about inclusivity? But as a CTO, if you are sitting up in the board meeting, or if you're sitting and talking to your CEO or to the executives, how do you think about, as a technologist, bringing in inclusivity in your approach? When you're thinking about selecting technology or deploying a technology or changing the world?
Well, this definitely, it depends on the application that we're applying it on. I would say, because of what we talked about as imaging, for example, we do like applying a technology that you can genuinely say it will disrupt a certain market because of its sudden change in the way it works. No more sensors, just a camera, and you're just good to go. So by itself, this means more people will get to use this at cheaper price and a wider audience. You're creating these kind of inclusivity when it comes to the technology. Of course, in certain sections and sectors like medical field, you do have to take care of the data sets that you're collecting, that they're more wide to cover more. For example, skin. I mentioned earlier to you that we had an issue of that. Of course, this is very common for anyone who uses image processing, that if you're using it in medical section, you have to take care of different skin colors and so on. Otherwise, the system will not give the same accuracy. So inclusivity means you are aware of what you're going into and you list them properly to begin with. Otherwise, you will fall back after a few years.
And specifically in the healthcare or health tech space, I think what has happened really, like you spoke about the platforms which are driving hackathons like Kaggle or any of these, the reason why, and I want to get your point of view, as a CTO, definitely as an organization, you may be building your own IP, you may be building your own areas which you want to protect, but what open innovation you want to drive in, because you're not going to share what you've only learned, but you're also going to learn from that environment. So open innovation is something which you think can drive inclusivity within your organization or other organization as well?
I would say definitely. Of course, I 100% support this. As a person who was an instructor in a university, this means a lot to students. I would say that we apply this in our company usually through internships. When you get a fresher into your company and you get them involved in the process, not only just making them, walk around the engineer and just watch them what they do. You get them involved with the process and you include them in your meetings. You start listening to complete different perspective of things, especially that they're still young, they're learning, they have a lot to do. So they would like to, have some attention. So they will do a lot of impressive things.
Yeah, building on to what you've just said, some of the things which we have seen, at least working out, is even though we are a service provider, we work with some of our other clients, we also work with other startups. We also collaborate with other companies and it's not that, we also attend conferences like this because, when you think about inclusivity, I often say don't build your world as a frog in the well kind of a concept where you're just building it within your own company. You are also trying to bring in ideas and perspectives from outside. That's one perspective. The second thing is we've also set up our own AI labs with universities. Like you spoke about you being a professor, you being a researcher. We have 2 AI labs set up with institutions so that we can learn from bright minds, whether these are academias or people who are pursuing their PhDs. So we've built that perspective of inclusivity in a very different way from a technology, and strongly believe in open innovation as a concept, because and an open innovation is not just restricted to bringing in startups or participating in hackathons, but you can actually widen that horizon. And one of the horizon is actually participating in the conferences like this. But as organizations continue on this path, Wessam, one of the challenge I see is, digital transformation. People can keep talking about it, eternity. Taking that first step is always difficult, because there is a fear of inclusivity as well. Because whether we will be able to, whether what we are trying to implement will help all our customers or our employees or the larger stakeholders. What would be your recommendation be to them? Like, how do they overcome those fears of inclusivity?
I would say that there is one point that's very important to talk about when it comes to this. It was an advantage towards during the pandemic, that it actually gave a huge chance to multiple people from different places to work together through the remote jobs. And now, I'm not sure about other parts of the world. They probably already had the remote work done before, but here it was very unlikely to have anything running remotely. Everyone wanted to see the people. Everyone had this, as you said, check in, check out, typical type of job. They had this, feeling that this is the right way to be done. The pandemic forced the digital transformation, and at the same time, it was an advantage towards more inclusivity when it comes to work, I would say. It allowed people to get more involved. You could be anywhere in the world and still be part of the company, not take the day off, and still do your job at your time. A lot of companies now are adapting, just like our previous speakers talked about. They're adopting the flexible time work, so it doesn't really matter. So it's all about tasks. So including inclusivity means, first of all, that the company mindset is accepting this, that they really care about having more people regardless. Like, also, you see that in the technology section, you still have a gap between the gender. Like, there is more male to female.
Yep. This conference as well.
Yeah.
I was just in the morning. Yes, the marketing conference has a very different gender mix. But I was looking at the morning when the conference started, the entire gender mix was very different.
True. While there is a lot of talented females out there, I've seen many. I would say they're typically titled that a female would fit better to social media, she will fit better to marketing, she will fit better to secretary. These kind of labels that we throw around. So when you're having someone working with you remotely, you're blindly selecting the skills. You don't really care whoever they are. So it was more inclusive. I would say that we're moving towards that till now when it comes to employment.
Still a long way.
Still, yeah. Because now they're starting going back. But yeah, hopefully at some point we'll have a platform that does not have any information about.
So building on this, and I'm going to put you on spot, what is your team mix looks like?
You mean like
gender mix?
We actually have 3 to 4 like ratio still. The male is a bit more, but we try our best to include females involved. A lot of females are interested heavily in UI, UX. We also saw our friend the other in the morning. She's into this field as well. So I would say, they're into design and stuff. But I've seen a lot of my previous students, for example, computer engineers. They're very into technology and they're very bright. So yeah, there is still a chance, but it has to be pushed a bit cultural wise.
No, it's a big one. You need to bring in that inclusivity at all levels, as I was talking about, and it's also multidimensional, whether it is gender, race, caste, or the sect which people come from. It's important, and it's bringing in global people. And I've seen enough over a time period that if I bring in that inclusivity from these dimensions, I get to learn a lot personally. And it has helped me to become better at my job. And as I said, I'm still a student, not an expert. So I'm learning every day. But I know we have some time left, and I want to talk about this specific topic about AI in the last few, because you are an expert. I would call you an expert. You've done your research there. I haven't. For people like me who don't know coding, who don't understand, we can write basic SQL codes or can get our arms around basic dashboards. How do you bring in inclusivity there? Because we didn't have our natural training there. We didn't probably choose to build that career there. And today, there is a big demand for the skills. But at the same time, it's not necessary demand to go and code, but to understand and apply or implement. So how do you bring in inclusivity in AI specifically?
Yeah, I would say first step before AI coding in general, a big amount of companies move towards the no-code platforms to allow their employees to get involved regardless of their knowledge. If we're talking about the whole society, I would say that nowadays, even for example, I'm giving an example of UAE's schools. They're now including programming in a very young age. We're talking about elementary schools. So students are now getting involved much earlier than for our generation. We got involved in bachelors, for example. But regardless of coding, if you're talking about the no-code, platforms, they're heavily being spread everywhere. There are just write on Google no-code platform, you'll find at least 10 successful ones. So I would say anyone who wants to get involved, they can get involved over there, and then they'll take it from there to add AI. I'm sure that they already have that over there.
But let's say I don't want to study AI.
Okay.
I'm a person who's creative. You said UI, UX. I'm creative. But there is this word of social media, FOMO, right?
Oh, yes.
Now, every student is going through this programming language. Every child is learning Python. Every child is learning some SQL or some C-based language, Java-based languages. Is that good in the name of inclusivity?
Well, as I would say, as long as they're enjoying it, they will definitely find their way around it. Are we having saturation in the market now? Well, there is a huge apply to it. A lot of people are going towards it. But to be honest, very few stand out. Because at the end of the day, you might learn it. I always say that you might learn 10 languages, but eventually there are a few of them which you will stand out with and you will feel more comfortable working. This is for you,
Right.
But, nothing goes to waste, nothing. You will definitely use this somewhere or another at another project maybe. Some people are standing out because of their, they're thinking outside the box. Whether it was design or coding, the way they're even training their AI models. The AI has been there for quite some time, but you can see that few models are now becoming very popular. You mentioned ChatGPT. There is DALL-E before it, which is for image generation, and they're now popping up. That's because the previous ones were just building the foundation,
The base here.
Yeah, the base.
No, I think this conversation has been very interesting. Thank you for letting me go off very much. Do we have time for questions?
Any questions?
Any questions?
On the side of digital revolution, I would like to ask on ChatGPT, should we allow to use this kind of technology?
Which technology?
ChatGPT.
Oh, okay.
Any of these technologies, whether he spoke about DALL-E or ChatGPT, have you heard about Mid-Journey? People are making money out of it because they are generating NFTs. See, it's like a new toy. I would give that reference. Now, there are a lot of these new toys coming out. ChatGPT is like the newest toy for technologists like us, where we are all getting excited. But by the way, there are platforms like this already existing before ChatGPT. The only difference what ChatGPT did is it was launched by a company which is very well known, first of all. And second is it kind of got the attention more than any of the social media platforms ever had. So if you read the stats, amount of millions of subscriptions, but not kind of talking too much about that. But going back to your question, I think the question which we kind of both answered is look at it as an augmentation rather than a threat. Okay, I'll just give you an example. I don't know how to write a poem. I don't know how to write a song for living. Okay, if you have to ask me to do that, I will miserably fail. But that day for fun, because I heard somewhere you can do it, I wrote a rap song on ChatGPT. Okay, just for fun's sake. And I was surprised. Okay, with minimal inputs, it gave me a song lyrics where it clearly said, okay, what is the first verse, then the chorus, then the second verse, chorus, third verse. It kind of crafted the entire song. Today, if I had to sit and think about the questions which I have to ask him, would have taken me 30 minutes. It took me 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, because it threw 5 questions in front of me. And I said, okay, I tweaked this and I sent it to him. 5 minutes, my job was done. So look at it as an augmentation, whether it's ChatGPT or any of these platforms which you can leverage, rather than trying to look at it as a threat or whether it's going to harm this. Yes, everything with the guardrail should be leveraged. If it starts throwing information which is not in confirmation of the society, then you should be wary of that.
Just to add to your words, keep in mind that it's only been out for like a week now, or approximately 10 days. Of course, it became a trend and all, but what I've learned for these kind of platforms, they don't come without a price. So number one is they're keeping your generated data. So whatever you generate over there could easily be rechecked if it was auto-generated or it was genuinely done by a person. This is the first thing. The second thing, I doubt that it will remain free. At some point, they will have their way back of revenue, one way or another, right? Because that's business plan wise.
It's freemium model, right?
Yeah.
They'll make it free for some time, and then I'm sure if you get too addicted to it, they'll start charging money for you.
Exactly. The first thing I thought about when I was, reading about it, you could easily put a text file and then it summarizes you. Or you could write a conclusion of a report, especially for students. I could see the amount of copy paste that could happen because of, simplifying the job. It could be a good thing, but it could be a very bad thing. We're teaching our students, the new younger generation, that they can, play around things and get them easily out. But again, as long as it's being saved, they could...
Just building on to what he just said, I'll give you another platform, okay, which has been in existence for a couple of years now. It's called Descript.ai. If anybody has heard of this platform? No. And I had to sit and train it for 6,000 words with my voice. Now, you're hearing me. If I didn't have to be here, I could have given the entire script to it, written script. Think about it, I could have generated this entire speech on ChatGPT, put it in Descript, and just say it in Anis's voice. It will sound like me. So platforms exist, and I've used that platform. I'm telling you, I've used that platform not on client calls or internal calls that I'm sleeping and that bot is talking on behalf of me. No. But I did podcasts and I made mistakes. Now, when you've done a podcast, like if I'm doing this conversation, I can't correct it. I've already said things. But using that platform, I can correct my voice, as an example. So platforms exist. You can use it for your advantage and use it as a tool, as a hammer. I gave that rather than, okay, now I have a hammer and I want to kill it, right? So that's the analogy I will share.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, thanks for the great discussion. It was awesome experience. So I was hearing for the earlier session of the conferences, which was more around the metaverse and all those buzzwords. And then there's a discussion where we talk about inclusivity of where Internet 1.0 is still not has been there in the lower rate of the world. So now what I feel is that there is a big gap which is getting created between what one point, like what there's a whole long of tail which is still in the previous technologies, and still people are trying to understand what is AI ML, and then there's a new word, metaverse, and then it creates a basically a trend which is forces the startups that you should also do something around that. So first of all, how do you see this gap? Because this gap is becoming larger and larger. Currently, I work with around 72 companies, and most of them are still following legacy systems. Okay. And when it comes to these kinds of platforms, you hear the words of metaverse and these things, and it's creating a big gap between what actually is happening and what we hear on the platforms. And this pushes the startups to more towards the following these buzzwords. So yeah, your view on this?
First of all, I think the wisest decision for any company to move is to only apply the technology when it works to their condition. A lot of people, to give another example of metaverse, similar to how people used to program, a lot of people used the word AI, they misused it. They wanted to put AI everywhere, blockchain everywhere. The point is, do you really need AI in certain applications? Not really. So was it really needed? No, it wasn't. But it was because it was a buzzword, right? So I think the wisest decision for them is to move slowly and depending on what the situation is. Metaverse disrupted everything. Yes, it didn't disrupt it in a way that it failed or something. No, but it created classes in the technology field. Like people who have access to metaverse, they're in a different class. It's like we have just like you said, you have metaverse and you have people down. So if you don't move up, you're lost or something. But I don't think that that's an actual scenario. In real life, we're still not in the metaverse yet, right? We're still moving towards it. So they should think wisely, apply it when it comes, and they will reach there if it applies to their services. Otherwise, they will have to update it or something.
I have a question for you. Are you a startup?
Yes.
And you are being forced into metaverse?
Not forced, but when we
There's a FOMO, right?
Yeah,
Everybody else is doing it.
Exactly.
You also have to do it. So I'll just give you some other perspective, okay? If I have to advise you for your company or for your whoever it is, like you said, there are still first world problems exist, whether it's in a nation or whether it's in a company. And today, like I'll give you two examples. Today there is a company in the US who filed for bankruptcy, not a metaverse company. It was a big, huge noise it made. It was in the business of alcoholic beverage. They were going to disrupt the entire wine industry. Okay, and there's a lot of conversation going on the internet wide field, by the way, right now, as we speak. At the same time, Sanskrit, which is, first language from, not the first language, the manuscript which existed. None of the NLP platforms, by the way, ever thought about Sanskrit decoding that. Today, it's been in the paper now. There has been somebody who's a scholar in Cambridge, I believe, Rishi Rajagopalan. He built an AI to actually decode Sanskrit language, and he's been able to do that. Now, going back, he could have done Mandarin or Cantonese, right? Why did he go back and solve that first world? Because many languages have been derived from Sanskrit, if you go back to the language history. So going back to your point, if you want to build a company, think about solving the first world problem. And a simple analogy is, like he said, everything doesn't require AI. If you really dissect any analytical problem, 80 to 90% is data job. Last 5% to 10% is the analytical model. Yeah? So that's AI or that's analytics, that true 5-10%. If you can solve that 80-90% data problems, data challenges, getting the basic data right, you will make money, you will be profitable, and you will never have to file for bankruptcy. Let FOMO be there. That's okay. It's good to be aware of what's happening, but don't try to instill it and jump on that train and there is no tracks ahead, which may have a bad scenario for you in the future.
Thank you.
I think we are on time, but thank you.
Take one last question. One last. So thank you so much. It was a very nice fireside chat. And I'm an HR person. So thank you very much for mentioning that, like when the CTOs are creating strategy, they forget sometimes HR as a department. So thank you for that. So my specific question here would be, as an HR person, what is your recommendation? What are the top 3 skills that we need to build up for the workforce in general? What will be those recommendations?
For your department or for the organization?
For the organization in general, because we have different levels of knowledge when it comes to data or the transformation in general, digital transformation. So from your perspective, what would be like the main 3 skills that we need to consider to build up in an organization?
I'll give you a high-level tip. Hopefully that helps. One is awareness. Okay. And awareness of platforms, methodologies, technologies, not overwhelming them. And I'm a big movie buff. Okay. And if you have to teach somebody what is AI, show them Minority Report. Okay. Show them Ready Player One. If you have to explain what metaverse is, as an example. You can use very different learning methods rather than forcing them to get them into a classroom and teaching them boring subjects, which they may not relate to. If you show them a movie and then show them, this is what AI means, this is what metaverse means, this is what technology means, this is how you can use data for good and bad, like Minority Report shows you both. As an example, show them that and you will see they will have awareness. They will understand, okay, what it can be used and not used, and do some field trips. I would use an example. Show them how to look at a problem, not as a problem, but how do you now look at, okay, if this is bottle of water, what kind of data can you generate from this? If you look at this bottle, can you write it down and tell me what data do you generate? This is what the machine can see. This is what a system sees, as an example. So that awareness and then applicability, which is the second piece. Okay, if I give you 10 data points about this bottle, what can you fix now? And last but not the least is, if they are really people who are cream a la cream, how do you motivate them to get to the next level? Those are the 3 things which I would recommend. If you have anything to add.
I think for me, I would say they have to be adaptable and accept the change. To change to the best, of course. Like, for example, if you have a system that's running manually, you're moving it towards a digital system. Now, a lot of older mindsets will find this very difficult. So we find that the majority of companies, they force it on their employees, which is extremely bad, I would say. It has to be convinced. They need to understand the need of this. Because the moment you force something on people, I think HR does that all the time. So they have to understand why they're doing it. Because even if it was for the sake of the business, they have to understand this is important because this and that. And at the end of the day, whatever language it is, whatever technology it is, it all can be taught. Everyone can learn the technology. It just needs, just like you said, awareness and acceptability. If they accept to change to that they want to learn that technology, they will go for it. But if they are not willing, even if you force them to learn it, they won't, and they will just fail most of the time. So, you have to work on the convincing part. HR has to work on the convincing part.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, for sure.